And we are live back at it again with week 11 of the Gridiron Addressed. He was on last week. He's back again. He really is just the co-host of this show. I got my good friend and resident Steelers fan, Chris Deluca. He's got to be feeling good tonight, but let's hear it from the man himself. Chris, how are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Won another ugly game, but as you know, we were talking about before the program, there is no other team that is as good at winning ugly games as the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we managed to win an ugly game that was incredibly, incredibly important.
And Chris, I'm going to be honest. Going into this, I didn't think Pittsburgh was going to be able to step up, but they managed to win without scoring a single touchdown. Are you at all worried about this Steelers offense going into the later parts of the season?
Incredibly worried. I mean, this is the second time that we've done this year, and I'm worried about the offense. Yes, we did look better, I will say, even though we didn't score a touchdown. Overall, what we need to do is just drive the ball upfield, and that's something that they struggle at. But what is giving me hope is that they're willing to do that now. Russell Wilson is willing to take the risks, and I think Tomlin trusts him enough to actually do these more risky upfield plays. And yeah, some of them work, some of them don't. Obviously, the big one that did not work was the end zone interception by Russell Wilson, which was probably the worst interception I've seen this year. But the flip side of that is that now Tomlin is finally willing to go and move the ball upfield. It's not like we're going a screen pass on 3rd and 11, on our own side of the field. I think that those days are kind of gradually getting into the past.
It's kind of interesting to see, a Steelers defense has been a staple of that franchise for years since the ghost of Ben Roethlisberger was still at quarterback for that team. The defense was still dragging him to winning seasons by what felt like an absolute miracle year in, year out. And now it feels a little more balanced, which is it's nice to see. By all accounts, I should have been a Steelers fan. My family's from Pennsylvania, but Panthers fan forever and always. Looking ahead to next week for the Steelers, Chris, they are going up against the Browns, who did not look good against the against a bad Saints team. Like the Saints are tied for the Panthers for the worst record in the NFC South. How are you feeling about this upcoming matchup against the Browns?
Hey, man, the dog pound is a hard place to play, regardless. And Jameis Winston, while he may be, Mr. 30 for 30, Mr. inconsistent, or, incredibly consistent at being the exact balance, Jameis Winston passed for 395 yards and 2 touchdowns against okay Saints defense, not fantastic, but an okay Saints defense. For us to win, our big key to the game is going to be continuing to pressure the quarterback. I just had to solve that issue, by the way. I had to go kick Mr. Pisco, the cat, out just a few minutes before the program. But anyway, continue to pressure with edge rushers. Let TJ Watt do TJ Watt things, but that secondary is absolutely needs to pick him off at least once or twice for us to be able to win this. When it comes to our defense, I'm very proud of the Steelers. We held the number one offense in the league, which was averaging 31.8 points to 16 points. I think that is great. The Baltimore Ravens average almost 32 points a game. That's impressive. And us being able to limit them, I'm not going to say confident, but I feel pretty good going into a short week, which, by the way, as I've mentioned on this show and At a Pocket and all the other shows in this program, I absolutely despise Thursday Night Football. I do not like it. I think it's bad for both teams and players' health, and it just produces bad football. But I'm feeling okay. I'm not going to say confident. I'm feeling okay going into this Thursday night game on the lake.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. Hopefully we see that Steelers offense pick it up a little bit, get some touchdowns, but I definitely agree with what you said. They looked better than they have, and I don't think 18 points is completely reflective of how they have improved. But moving on, Shannon Smith, host of Quick Hits on Boom Broadcasting. We got to talk about your 49ers, Shannon. I mean, Geno Smith rushing touchdown with 12 seconds left. Absolutely absurd ending. And I love to see that for Geno, honestly. I've been a Geno Smith guy. Chris, I know you are. You WVU alum. How do you feel about that game? I'm concerned about the 49ers. They're sitting at 5-5. They're supposed to be closer to full strength. Ayuk's still out, but they got guys back. They're supposed to be better than this. Chris, do you think the 49ers are going to be able to save this season, push for the playoffs, and that this was just one of those weird divisional games that can go either way?
It's hard. I mean, that division is incredibly, incredibly close. And I kind of lean towards the Seahawks, actually, when we were doing our football and more picks earlier this week. I hard considered that. I sat there in my lunch break probably for about 10 minutes leaning towards Seattle, but I went with this safe pick. We said this earlier in the year. This had to have been like week 3 or 4 Gridiron Dress, where we mentioned how the 49ers just don't look themselves. There's just something off about them. And we thought that was going to go away when they got healthy. And yes, they didn't have Nick Bosa for that final drive. That was definitely played a factor, especially with Geno being able to make that rush off of the edge, the exact edge that Nick Bosa would have been on. But with that being said, I think Seattle is a solid team, and I do think that was a trap game for San Francisco, but I think that they're hitting the point where even though the NFC is so weak this year and only has about 2 good teams and the wild card is wide open, I think they're about 2 or 3 2 bad losses to division teams away from losing this. And I actually want to look before we get off of this topic. I do want to look who they have left. And they got look at this. They got Green Bay, Buffalo, a winnable game against Chicago, Rams, Dolphins, Lions, and then Cardinals is how they finish out the year. That's rough. They need to win more than half of those to have a wild card chance.
Yeah, and as it stands right now, the Washington Commanders have the 7th seed, and I don't see Washington losing that. My gut tells me Philly's going to get the division win, and Washington's getting that wild card spot. You got Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers all at 5-5, so maybe they make a push, but I back Washington to pick up that win. And speaking of Washington, let's touch on them a little bit. They dropped 2 games in a row now. Chris, are you at all concerned about this? They have gone up against some really good defenses these past 2 weeks. Do you think that Washington's going to bounce back, or could this be like a coming back down to earth?
I think it's a combination of both, Aaron. They faced 2 fantastic defenses. I was clowning the Eagles defense earlier this season, but they have, they proved me wrong. They proved me wrong to being, they held Jaden Daniels down as much as they physically could. Obviously the Steelers defense dominated him, but here's the big thing to think about, man, is Washington is going, the cat in the background. Washington is going to face some really, really good defenses when they make the playoffs, if they make the playoffs, because yes, the remainder of their schedule is pretty bad. They have a very, very bad Cowboys team twice. They have the Titans, they have the Saints, and they have the Eagles and the Falcons. I think that they win most of those except the Eagles game. I think that they sweep Dallas. I think that I'll say that I think they win all of the remaining games except their game against the Eagles. But the thing is you're not going to be playing Titans, the Saints, or the Cowboys in the playoffs, Washington. So that's something to definitely take into account. My apologies about some idiot in a motorcycle behind me. But yeah.
Yeah, that is all good. If the results hold like they will, Washington's going to be playing Philly in the first round. That'll be tough. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a season, though. If Philly does get another win against Washington, it'll be interesting to see. Washington's building something great, though. You got to give props to the new ownership and Adam Peters. They're doing great things for a franchise that suffered for an incredibly long time. So it's really cool to see as a unbiased perspective. But Chris, we got to talk about this Chiefs-Bills game that just ended. The Chiefs finally lose. It felt like it was bound to happen, and I love that Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills were the team to finally get it done. Chris, how are you feeling about this game? And do you think that this makes Buffalo the best team in the AFC?
I still think it's going to go to Kansas City because the only team that is mildly better, I'll still say Pittsburgh's the best team at winning ugly football games against teams that they shouldn't be ugly games. Kansas City is pretty close second, if not first, when it comes to doing that against everybody. Look at the Denver game, for example. That was an incredible game. It was a wonderful called game by Nance and Romo, by the way, the two best announcers in football, if you ask me. In the finish, when I was sitting there, they're down by 9. Up until that Mahomes interception, as Tony Romo said as well, it's not over until there's triple zeros on the clock. Mm-hmm. And if anybody's going to find a way to win that ugly game, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and crew. It was fascinating to me how Andy Reid did some things that are not very Andy Reid-esque, such as trying to draw the Bills offside right before the 2-minute warning going into the half. That was something that you don't really see Andy Reid do very much. So I'm wondering if they're going to start becoming more desperate to do stuff that they don't traditionally do when they have these harder games, especially when they make the postseason. Look at Mahomes trying to force the ball upfield at the end of the game, which resulted in that interception, for example.
Yeah, I love the win for Buffalo. Shannon called it on quick hits. Mm-hmm. Bills were bound to get a win, and Kansas City doesn't have that pressure being undefeated. So as much as it might not affect players too much going into a game undefeated, and they're constantly being talked about undefeated three-peat Super Bowl winners, it's got to feel good. I really think Kansas City could come out of this loss a stronger and more dangerous team now that they don't have that kind of pressure, which it could be scary, honestly, because they made it this far undefeated with Mahomes looking human. And he's not always going to look human. We're going to see the return of superhuman Patrick Mahomes, and it's probably going to come right as the playoffs start. And Kansas City's probably going to win the Super Bowl. I feel like Detroit's probably the best chance to beat them. Chris, bigger picture, do you think Chiefs or Lions are the best team in the NFL, and who could stop this red-hot Detroit team?
It's a hard question. And on one final note, with Kansas City just as a whole, perfect 72 if the Miami Dolphins stay alive. So congratulations to them. That's always, something I don't think will ever get broken. But I still think that with Kansas City's defense, if it was in a hypothetical Super Bowl between Detroit and Kansas City, I would still pick Kansas City because of the defense. And I think that in the end, when it comes down to it, Dan Campbell lives and dies by the extreme play calls, the incredibly risky play calls. They lost to the 49ers because of some very, very gutsy play calls, to say the least. And I see in the Super Bowl, he would be doing that in everyone. I don't even think they'd punt in the Super Bowl, to be honest with you. I think it could be 4th and 15 on their own side of the field, and Dan Campbell wouldn't bring out the punter. I think that the only situation where Kansas City does not go, at least make the Super Bowl, if not win it, is either Buffalo could finally undo the voodoo, as I always say, because I always pick Buffalo in the regular season because they always beat Kansas City in the regular season, then they lose in the postseason. If they can finally undo that voodoo, or if a random team like Pittsburgh Steelers, just using that as an example, in the playoffs with that defense could go and pick off Mahomes 2 or 3 times and manage to come away with a win. I think it was either going to be a random team like Pittsburgh or Baltimore, or probably not much, because I don't think Detroit could in the Super Bowl. I still would give it to Kansas City.
You know, I wouldn't even call Pittsburgh a random team, honestly. That defense is good enough to where, I mean, hey, they can beat anybody on any given day, like you mentioned earlier. They held the best offense in the league to 16 points. That's a massive statement. If this offense can just turn like 1 or 2 of those field goals into a touchdown, it's an incredibly dangerous football team with a defense that's that good and an offense that is that close to scoring a good amount of points. But moving on to another AFC team, the Jets are just downright terrible. They've had a terrible run of luck with quarterbacks. Zach Wilson was bad there. Darnold was bad there. He's doing pretty good in Minnesota, though, which is cool to see. And the man that was supposed to be the savior of the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, is looking terrible. You know, I didn't have a lot of faith in Rodgers going to the Jets. I didn't think we were going to see anything crazy. I didn't understand the hype at all. Rodgers looked human in his last year in Green Bay and in a worse run team with I don't know. I feel like they might actually have equal weapons, if not better than what Rodgers had towards the end of his time in Green Bay. But if they supposedly gave Rodgers everything he wanted, he's got his weapons, he's got all his friends there. Nathaniel Hackett still got a job somehow. But Chris, do you think this is a systemic problem with the Jets? Like they just cannot build a team around people and they need to gut it all? Or do you think that this comes down to just bad quarterbacks?
I think it's both. I mean, there is absolutely no excuse at this point with their offense. Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams is there. You have Breece Hall in the backfield, and you have someone who I said should have retired and become the host of Jeopardy, to be honest with you. I thought he was going to retire when Devontae Adams left for Las Vegas. But the biggest thing to say, regardless of whose fault it is, Zach Wilson winning percentage, 364, Sam Darnold, 342, and Aaron Rodgers now so far as a 273 winning percentage. That is awful. I think that is a systemic issue, but it's also a quarterback's issue. Out of all 3 of those, if I was to pick one when they were there, not now, but when they were there, I would have picked Zach Wilson. Now, obviously, I would pick Sam Darnold because he's having a very respectable year in Minneapolis, but it's both. They're atrocious. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can have that many high quality weapons and still just be as it's comically bad. They didn't even get a first down the entire first quarter.
I did not know that. That is that's kind of funny, honestly. I'm not the biggest Aaron Rodgers guy, but as it stands right now, the Jets have the 7th pick in the draft. Chris, do you think it would be a good idea for them to go after a quarterback, like Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, maybe even Dylan Gabriel? Or do you think they should hold off on a quarterback? Or would it be good for someone to, be able to sit behind Aaron Rodgers? Because I think he could do a good job of mentoring a young quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing is despite how kooky and weird he is, he has been willing to mentor quarterbacks, as we saw with Jordan Love. That was relatively okay transition that they had in Green Bay. He obviously was mentored by the worst human being alive, the previous Green Bay quarterback, the worst human being to walk the earth. But still, he knows that being mentored by a talented quarterback is a good move. I could definitely see them drafting one. And I do think that Rodgers' ego would play a factor in that, but I don't think that it would play a factor enough he would be like, oh, I quit. I'm not going to play, or I want to get traded. I think that I think both New York teams are going to draft a quarterback, to be honest with you. I think they're going to be 2 first-round top 10 quarterback drafts out of both teams in East Rutherford, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jason, our resident Giants fan, Jets are trash. Rodgers needs to fade away. I definitely agree. I think it would be very smart for the Jets to take a quarterback, and they don't have to rush them in to start. And I think a year and a half behind Rodgers would be incredibly beneficial for someone like Quinn Ewers, who I think is really talented, but would not do well starting right away and would massively benefit from, a year behind a good veteran like we saw Patrick Mahomes sit behind Alex Smith his rookie season. Jason thinks the Giants will go quarterback. I don't see how they don't go quarterback. Daniel Jones has been a failure with the Giants. He wasn't the right pick when they took him, and the fact that they signed him to a big extension is just embarrassing. But Chris, before we move on to the primetime preview, let's talk about rookie quarterbacks this year. I mean, clearly Jaden Daniels is the best of the bunch, but between Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, and Drake May, who you think is the second best rookie quarterback?
I'm going to go with Bo Nix. That performance today, man, was awesome. You looked fantastic today. And I think that the Broncos, for the first time in a long time, have a franchise QB. He definitely has some growing pains. He's going to continue to go through it. But I would say that Bo Nix looks the most matured out of them. I'd say a close third relatively is Caleb Williams. I mean, Caleb Williams has led 2 should-be game-winning drives this year and lost both of them due to, tragic situations, Tyreek Stevenson. And then
the Bears are going to bear. I mean, they like the Steelers find ways to win ugly, the Bears find ways to lose ugly. It's something, man, but I got to agree with you. I think Bo Nix is number 2 out of the bunch. Drake May and Caleb Williams, we haven't seen as much out of Drake May, so I would definitely put Williams above him, but I think the Patriots might have their guy, honestly. Definitely keep an eye on him the rest of the season. I think he could. I mean, he had a good first quarter. First time in 5 years Patriots have had a quarterback pass for 100 yards and a touchdown in one quarter. Last guy was Tom Brady in 2019. So they finally got a quarterback that can move the ball, which is I wouldn't say it's nice to see because the Patriots had the greatest dynasty we've ever seen in the league, but their fans got something to look forward to now, and good for them, honestly, because Patriots have been garbage since Tom Brady left, and it might take another couple years before they're competitive, but I think they got their guy. But moving on, Sunday Night Football, Chargers-Bengals. Chargers are 1-point favorites against a Cincinnati team that's been super inconsistent. Their offense can score points like crazy, but defense has just been garbage. It feels like they can't get stops, and they're really letting Joe Burrow down. Chris, what are your thoughts going into this game?
I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a relatively high-scoring-ish game. Obviously, Cincinnati put up a lot of points on a great Baltimore defense, and that game was incredible. But the Chargers look pretty solid. I mean, I had the Chargers being one of the worst teams in the NFL this year simply because of all the pieces that they lost, and they've looked solid. I mean, a legitimate wild card contender. Excuse me. And I'm going to give it close. I am going to probably give it to the Chargers on a close one, though.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be that the Chargers defense has been good. I mean, 6th in yards allowed. They've only given up 12 touchdowns, which is, I'm checking real quick, that is the fewest touchdowns allowed by any defense in the league. So it'll be super interesting to watch a high-powered Bengals offense go up against a Chargers defense that has been really stout all season. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the Bengals defense just failing them in some capacity. I could see Quentin Johnston or Ladd McConkey getting a big touchdown late in the game to seal it, or Dobbins breaking away on a big run. I think it'll be a close game, but Bengals defense is going to let them down, and Chargers will probably end up winning by like 7. But oh, excuse me. Jason, Bengals need this win bad. They really do. I mean, they're functionally done already. According to the NFL website, currently the Bengals have a 21% chance to make the playoffs. If they lose, that drops all the way down to 10%. And even if they win, they only have a 33% chance to make the playoffs. It's not looking good for Cincinnati. Jason thinks that Zach Taylor loses his job if Cincinnati can't get it done tonight. You know, I got to agree. There's too many good coaches that are going to be looking for jobs in this coming cycle to hang on to someone who really hasn't been good enough, like Zach Taylor. I mean, I could see Ben Johnson leaving Detroit for a Bengals head coaching job. I think that would be a phenomenal move. Michael Davis can't wait for Herbert to choke in prime time. It is what it is. I think he hates Herbert for whatever reason. I don't understand it. I like Justin Herbert a lot. The Chargers have not done a good job getting a team around that guy. Chris, what do you think of Justin Herbert as a player? Do you think he's gonna choke in primetime like Michael seems to think? And overall, you think Herbert is that guy for the Chargers?
I mean, I think that he definitely is, because I mean, I said a while ago, I've said this a few years ago when he got drafted, I say he's a top 10 quarterback, once he got out of the rookie growing pains. But I mean, just in the past few games here, 164 and a touchdown, 123.1 rating against Tennessee. He had a fantastic game back on the 21st of October, 349 yards, with no touchdowns against Arizona. He's been consistent. He's limited the interceptions. He only has 1 interception on the entire year. And that was actually against Carolina, ironically. So overall, I think he's obviously their franchise quarterback. Will he choke tonight? Maybe, maybe not. The Chargers kind of like to make things interesting, whether they like it or not. They're a weird team. They're a weird team overall. I would love to see them in the playoffs again, though. It's always kind of fun to see them in the playoffs because they're just a fun team,
Mm-hmm. As it stands, Chargers got a 77% chance to make the playoffs. If they win, that number jumps up to 89. If they lose, it's still at 65. So it'll be close. They got a solid chance to make it, regardless of how tonight goes. But a win would go a long way. Jason thinks Herbert is overrated. Chris, I feel like we might be outnumbered in our belief in Justin Herbert. But before we go tonight, Chris, do you have a final score prediction for tonight's game?
I'm going to go. So I think it's going to be kind of on the higher scoring end. I'm going to go with 31-21 Chargers.
I don't know if the Chargers are going to be able to put up that many points. I don't have complete faith in their offense. I'm going to go 27-21 Chargers win. They do just enough to stop that Bengals offense. Jason's going against us. Chargers 30 or Cincy 32, Chargers 17. It feels like it could go either way. The Bengals have just had some bad luck. That loss to Baltimore, that's just devastating for them, and a little devastating for Pittsburgh too, because a Bengals win there would have helped Pittsburgh a lot in moving towards a AFC North win. But that'll do it for Week 11 of the Gridiron Address. Chris, any last words before we go?
Hey man, Dugout Debrief coming up this Thursday, same time, same channel. We're doing team breakdowns, American League East, probably not this week, but next week I'll be getting our buddy Jason on, who's been in the comments. Shout out to him. Thanks for everything he does, just on behalf of everyone. We're probably going to be covering, I'm leaning towards covering the Orioles, the Rays, simply because of the stadium situation, and maybe one other AL East team. But again, tune into that. And thanks again for having me on, man. It's always fun.
No problem. Always glad to have you on. And Jason, you rock too, man. Love having you in the comments. I want to get you back on the show sometime next couple weeks, but that'll do it for week 11. Thank you all for watching, and let's go